War Marshal Kareth stood alone in the center of the iron assembly, and for the first time in 40 years of war, his hands did not feel steady. That alone should have frightened everyone in the chamber. He was not a politician. He was not a scholar. He was not one of the soft-voiced ministers who spent their lives moving symbols across maps. He was the Dominion's greatest warlord, the conqueror of 12 systems, the breaker of sieges, the commander who had forced proud civilizations to lower their flags and kneel. And now he had come to beg. Above him, the vast chamber of the stellar Dominion shone with cold silver light. The walls were covered with the banners of conquered worlds. The ceiling displayed a living map of the known galaxy, bright star systems glowing in calm order beneath Dominion control. Near the edge of that map, small and easy to miss, was one yellow star. Kareth looked up at it and felt a sharp, private dread. "War Marshal Kareth," said High Regent Solvar, his voice echoing from the black crystal throne. "You demanded an emergency hearing. You interrupted a council session on military expansion. You will now explain why." Every eye in the chamber turned toward him. The 12 ruling ministers sat in a half-circle around the throne, each one wearing the colors of a great house. Some looked annoyed. Some looked curious. A few looked amused. None of them looked afraid. That was the problem. Kareth drew in a slow breath. The scars beneath his armor still ached from half-healed wounds. His last mission had changed something in him. He had spent decades studying fleets, weapons, fortifications, and surrender patterns. He believed every species had a point where fear broke them. Then he met humans. "My regent," Kareth said, his voice low but firm, "I have come to request that the Dominion cease all plans concerning the Sol system." A quiet murmur moved through the chamber. Minister Valen actually laughed. "You interrupted us for that?" he asked. "A border system with one young species and no interstellar reach?" Kareth ignored him. "I am asking," he continued, "that Earth be marked forbidden. Was just studied you, but never invaded, never threatened, never cornered." Now the laughter spread wider. At the far end of the chamber, Fleet Lord Malrek leaned back in his chair and folded his arms over his armored chest. "This is about your damaged patrol group, is it not?" he said. "You lost soldiers in a boarding action and now you wish to turn embarrassment into policy." Karetha's jaw tightened. "It was not embarrassment," he said. "It was a warning." He lifted his arm and activated the combat projector in his gauntlet. A hologram sprang to life in the center of the chamber. At first it showed something that looked almost pathetic. A small human mining ship drifted against the dark, its hull patched with visible repairs, its paint uneven, its frame ugly and practical. It looked more like a machine built in desperation than a vessel worthy of fear. More laughter. "This is the terror of Earth?" Minister Valen asked. Kareth changed the angle. The recording shifted to internal combat footage from a Dominion helmet camera. The chamber grew still as armored soldiers moved down a cramped human corridor, their rifles raised. The passage was narrow, built for smaller bodies. Pipes and cables lined the walls. Steam poured from damaged panels. Then the shooting started. A human male rushed into view. One side of his body was covered in blood. One arm hung useless at the shoulder. By all reason, he should have been dying. Instead, he screamed and fired a rough-looking ballistic weapon point blank into the first soldier's faceplate. 2 Dominion soldiers dropped him with chest shots. He hit the deck. Then, with his final movement, he threw a charge under the boots of the boarding squad. The explosion filled the chamber with white light. When the image stabilized, 4 Dominion soldiers were dead and 2 more were burning. No one laughed. Kareth let the silence build. "This was not a military vessel," he said. "It was a mining ship." The image changed again. A human woman now stood in a breached compartment with no firearm at all. She held a cutting torch in one hand and a metal tool in the other. Her face was streaked with soot. One leg was clearly broken. She waited until the first soldier came through the hatch. Then she drove the torch into the seam of his helmet, blinding him, and used his body as a shield against the others. By the time she fell, 2 Dominion soldiers were dead. The footage ended. Kareth lowered the projector. We sent 40 trained soldiers aboard that vessel, he said. 15 returned. The chamber was silent now, but it was not the silence of understanding. It was the silence of disbelief. Minister Sarret, the oldest of the council, leaned forward slightly. You lost men to desperate civilians, she said. Tragic, yes, but hardly a reason to reshape policy. Kareth turned to her. That is what I thought, he said. So I investigated further. He raised the projection again. This time Earth filled the air above the chamber. Blue oceans. White cloud bands. Green land. It looked peaceful. Beautiful even. Kareth hated how deceptive it looked. This, he said, is a death world. That produced another ripple through the ministers, though this time not mockery. Concern. Gravity above standard, Kareth continued. Aggressive climate systems. Extreme temperatures. Unstable tectonic activity. Predatory megafauna. Toxic oxygen-rich atmosphere. Disease pressure beyond what most civilized species ever survive in primitive eras. He let those facts settle. Humans did not evolve in safety. They did not inherit comfort. They clawed themselves upward in a world that tried to kill them every day. Fleet Lord Malrek shrugged. That explains resilience, he said. Not danger. Kareth looked directly at him. No, he said. What explains the danger is how they survived. The image shifted again. Human figures running over long distances across open land. Ancient scenes reconstructed from historical data. Hunters chasing animals larger and faster than themselves. They are persistence predators, Kareth said. They are not the strongest. They are not the fastest. They endure. They chase until stronger creatures collapse. They do not need to overpower immediately. They only need to keep coming. Now the regent himself seemed interested. Kareth pressed on. Pain does not stop them the way it stops us. Fear does not break them the way it breaks others. Under stress, their bodies flood with combat chemicals. They continue through wounds that should cripple them. Their minds narrow toward action, not retreat. He paused. And more importantly, they have built a culture around this. The projection changed yet again. Human wars. Ancient battlefields. Trenches. Ruined cities. Missiles. Mushroom clouds. Soldiers dragging wounded comrades through fire. Civilians digging through rubble with bare hands. In one brief section of their history, Kareth said, they killed tens of millions of their own kind in war. They built weapons capable of ending their civilization. Then they looked at those weapons and said, if our enemies use them, we will use them too. Minister Valen frowned now. That sounds unstable, he said. It is, Kareth replied. And that is why they are dangerous. He moved through the images one by one. Human medics reviving dying bodies with electric shocks. Human firefighters running into collapsing buildings. Human sailors staying aboard sinking vessels to save others. Human soldiers making last stands in impossible conditions. Human families keeping predatory animals as companions. Human rescue teams crossing floodwater and fire for strangers. They bond easily, Kareth said. With kin, with allies, even with creatures unlike themselves. They form attachments quickly and defend them with irrational force. They do not measure everything by logic. They measure by loyalty, by pride, by memory. The High Regent's crystal throne pulsed once with dim light. Then perhaps they can be ruled through those instincts, he said. Kareth's face hardened. No, he said, because they connect loyalty to freedom. That word echoed differently in the chamber. Freedom. It was not a central value in the Dominion. Order was. Stability. Obedience. Hierarchy. But humans were different. They would rather suffer than kneel, Kareth said. I accessed their broadcasts. Their history archives. Their literature. Their songs. Again and again I found the same belief. A person who submits to tyranny has failed something sacred. Minister Sarret narrowed her eyes. Sacred? Yes, Kareth said. Their ideas vary. Their faiths vary. Their governments change. Their nations fight each other. But when an outside force tries to rule them, many of those divisions vanish. And what rises in their place is something much worse. What? Asked the regent. Kareth met his gaze. Unity through hatred. That landed heavily. Kareth took one final breath and played the last recording. This one came from an interrogation room. A human female sat in a restraint frame, burned, bleeding, missing 2 fingers. She looked barely old enough to be a soldier, though records showed she was not military at all. She had been part of a civilian cargo crew. A Dominion officer asked why she had resisted. Why she had not surrendered when surrender would have spared her pain. The human lifted her head. Even through the low-quality combat recording, the expression in her eyes was clear. Defiance. Cold and bright. She gave an answer in her own language. The machine translator paused, struggled, then rendered it. Because if you wanted my fear, you should have come with a bigger army. The chamber fell completely silent. Kareth shut off the projector. That, he said quietly, was a cargo worker. Not a trained soldier. Not a commando. Not a fanatic chosen from some elite corps. An ordinary human. No one interrupted him now. I have fought dozens of species, he continued. All of them had a threshold. A pain point. A number of casualties after which they sought terms. A class of leadership that could be pressured into surrender. A population that would choose survival over pride. He looked around the chamber, one face at a time. Humans are not like that. Fleet Lord Malrek stood. And yet, he said, they possess one system. No jump fleet. No outer colonies worth naming. No shield network that can withstand a modern assault. We are discussing a species with courage, yes, and brutality, yes, but still a species with no true place among the stars. Kareth turned fully toward him. That is exactly why you should fear them now. Malrek's eyes narrowed. Kareth stepped toward the center of the chamber again. They are young, he said. That means they are still changing. Still adapting. Still learning. Every war has made them faster. Every threat has made them harder. If you leave them alone, they may one day become our allies. He let the next words fall like iron. If you attack them, they will make it the purpose of their civilization to destroy you. That drew a sharp breath from more than one minister. The regent remained still. Fleet Lord Malrek gave a slow smile. Then perhaps, he said, it is better to strike before that happens. Kareth felt the chill run through him again. There was the fatal mistake. The one he had feared from the moment he entered the chamber. Malrek spread his hands toward the council. A fast campaign, he said. A decisive show of force. Break their orbitals. Seize command centers. Remove leadership. Install governors. In one generation they will become useful subjects. Several ministers nodded. Minister Valen spoke next. The Sol system contains strategic mineral belts and excellent positioning along future trade expansion lanes. Delaying annexation may cost us far more later. Exactly, Malrek said. We do not fear potential enemies. We prevent them. Kareth wanted to shout. Wanted to draw steel. Wanted to force them to understand that this was not strategy but arrogance wearing a uniform. Instead he did the only thing he had not yet done. He bowed his head. My regent, he said, and his voice grew rough, I am asking you not as a commander but as a servant of the Dominion. Leave Earth alone. That caused real shock. War Marshal Kareth did not plead. But he did now. Quarantine the system if you must. Watch them. Study them. Keep distance. But do not invade that world. Do not kill their people from orbit. Do not land troops in their cities. Do not teach them to hate us. The regent's gaze did not move. And if your fear is misplaced, he asked. Kareth answered without hesitation. Then I will accept disgrace for cowardice. And if you are right? Kareth looked up at the glowing point of Sol above them. Then if we make war on humanity, my regent, we will not be fighting for a system. He paused. We will be fighting for the future of the Dominion itself. The chamber held that sentence for several long seconds. Then the regent leaned back into the black crystal of the throne. His answer came cold and final. The Dominion does not yield opportunity because one warlord was shaken by stubborn primitives. Kareth closed his eyes once. Fleet Lord Malrek, the regent continued, you will assemble an expeditionary force. You will proceed to Sol. You will present terms of compliance. If they refuse, you will enforce Dominion order. Malrek bowed deeply, satisfaction clear on his face. It will be done. Kareth did not move. The meeting was ending. Ministers were already rising. Quiet conversation returned to the chamber. Strategy. Resources. Timetables. They were speaking of invasion as if it were already solved. As if Earth were just another world. Malrek approached him on his way out and placed a heavy hand on his shoulder. You have grown old, Kareth, he said. There is no shame in it. Kareth slowly turned his head. You still have time, he said. Malrek smiled. To conquer them? To leave them alone. Malrek's smile widened. Then he walked away. One by one the council members left the Iron Assembly until only Kareth remained beneath the glowing star map. He stared up at Sol. It looked so small from here. So harmless. But he had seen human eyes in burning corridors. He had seen untrained civilians make choices that veteran soldiers would fear. He had seen wounded bodies continue moving on nothing but fury and will. And worst of all, he had recognized something in them. Purpose. Not simple violence. Not madness. Purpose sharpened by pain. At last Kareth turned and walked from the chamber. As he crossed the long dark hall beyond the assembly doors, he activated a private military channel and sent a secure message to his household estate on his homeworld. The message was brief. Stockpile supplies. Reinforce shelters. Prepare for instability. He hesitated only a moment before adding one more line. If war with Earth begins, leave the capital regions immediately. Then he sealed the message and sent it. Far above him, beyond layers of metal and crystal, the map of the galaxy continued to glow in silent order. But Kareth no longer saw order when he looked at the stars. He saw a spark. A spark the Dominion had just decided to strike with an iron hammer. And he knew, with the cold certainty only old soldiers ever truly possess, that once the blow landed, the fire would spread farther than any of them could imagine. The Dominion thought Earth was only one small world at the edge of space. It did not yet understand that some worlds become dangerous only after you teach them your name. 6 months after the Iron Assembly ignored War Marshal Karatha's warning, the skies of the solar system changed forever. The first alarms began near Neptune. Deep space telescopes detected unnatural flashes in the dark. Long-range sensors picked up mass signatures far too large to be civilian traffic. Then, all across human space at nearly the same moment, military stations confirmed the same terrible truth. Ships. A lot of ships. More than 200 Dominion warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system, black and hard and vast against the stars. Their formation was perfect. Their power output was staggering. Even from a distance, the message was clear. This was not a visit. This was an ultimatum. On Luna Defense Command, Fleet Admiral Hannah Mercer stood in the central operations room with one hand resting on the edge of the tactical table. Blue light from the display washed over her face as more and more red markers appeared in the outer system. Around her, officers worked in sharp, controlled silence. No one panicked. Humanity had feared this day for years. The old ruins on Mars had proven they were not alone long before first contact. Since then, every serious defense planner on Earth had asked the same question. What if the first aliens we meet are not friendly? Now they had the answer. A comms officer turned from her station. Admiral, full count still rising. Current estimate, 214 warships. Multiple carrier-class hulls. Heavy weapons signatures across the line. Hannah nodded once. Any transmission? Not yet. They want us to look at them first, Hannah said. She understood the tactic immediately. It was old. Older than rockets. Older than iron. Show overwhelming force. Make resistance feel foolish before the shooting starts. On the tactical display, Earth glowed blue at the center of the inner system. Around it, human assets moved under emergency protocol. Orbital batteries unlocked. Defense satellites changed orientation. Civilian traffic lanes were shut down. Fleet signals flashed across local relays. Humanity's war fleet was small. Too small. 43 major combat vessels, 12 support warships refitted for battle, and a screen of drones, missile craft, and hidden mine platforms scattered through prepared zones. It was enough to hurt someone. Not enough to win a straight fight. Hannah knew it. Her officers knew it. And somewhere out beyond Neptune, the invaders almost certainly knew it too. At last the transmission came. It arrived on every military frequency, every civilian emergency band, every commercial relay. The signal carried a translated voice stripped of emotion. Species of Sol 3. This system now falls under the authority of the Stellar Dominion. Cease all military mobilization. Prepare to receive occupation command. Any resistance will be met with corrective force. You have one planetary rotation to comply. The message ended. For 3 seconds no one spoke. Then the room came alive. Reports flooded in from Earth, Mars, Luna, the Belt, Europa, Titan. News channels exploded. Markets crashed within minutes. Religious networks called it judgment. Social media turned into a storm of fear, disbelief, rage, and rumor. Hannah never looked away from the tactical table. "Open a reply channel," she said. Her communications chief hesitated. "Admiral, are we sending to the flagship only or all bands?" "All bands." A few heads turned toward her. She spoke before anyone could question the choice. "They came to intimidate the whole species. So we answer as a whole species." The channel opened. Hannah straightened, her hands behind her back, and gave the order that would be heard on every human world and every Dominion bridge. "This is Fleet Admiral Hannah Mercer of the United Earth Defense Command. You have entered our system without permission and threatened our people. Leave now. Turn your fleet around and depart peacefully." Her expression did not change. "If you do not, every ship, every station, every city, and every human being in this system will resist you." She paused. "This is your only warning." The channel closed. In the operations room, no one moved for a moment. Then a young tactical lieutenant exhaled slowly. "Ma'am, we just threatened 200 warships." Hannah looked at the spreading red formation near Neptune. "No," she said quietly. "We informed them." Far out in the outer system, aboard the Dominion flagship Sovereign Wrath, Fleet Lord Malrek listened to the translation and laughed. His senior officers joined him. One of them, a lean commander named Tarav, did not laugh. "They sound resolved," Tarav said carefully. Malrek waved a dismissive hand. "Every young species sounds resolved before occupation. Resolve is cheap. Reality is expensive." He turned toward the central display where Earth and its moons shone in pale light. "Select a secondary target," he said. "Something visible. Something painful. We will show them what defiance costs." An officer brought up colonial maps. "Europa, my lord. Industrial ice operations. Civilian heavy. Light defense." Malrek nodded. "Transmit a warning. 1 hour to evacuate. Then destroy the colony." Tarav's expression tightened. "My lord, if the goal is surrender, a military target may." "The goal," Malrek interrupted, "is obedience." The order went out. On Europa, Colony Administrator Miriam Vale read the message twice, then once more aloud to the command staff around her. No one in the room looked surprised. Only angry. The colony had practiced evacuation drills for years. Most residents were miners, engineers, ice haulers, mechanics, and their families. Hard people. Quiet people. The sort who fixed leaking pipes with numb fingers and returned to work the next day. Miriam began issuing orders immediately. Launch every civilian shuttle. Priority 1 is children, injured, and life support dependents. Priority 2 is transport crews. Seal the lower tunnels after final departure. A heavy-shouldered engineer near the back of the room lifted his hand. "And the refineries?" Miriam looked at him. He did not need to say more. She understood. "Leave me a demolition team," she said. The engineer gave a short nod. 58 minutes later, Europa's sky was full of fleeing human transports. Inside the colony, Miriam walked the final line through the freezing corridors with 6 volunteers at her side. Charges were set in the reactor housings. Ice-boring shafts were overloaded. Storage tanks were rigged. Dock clamps were sabotaged. Guidance routines in the orbital fuel spine were quietly rewritten. They moved quickly. No speeches. No drama. Just work. At the final airlock, one of the volunteers stopped. He was old enough to be Miriam's father, grease on his hands, frost on his beard. "You coming?" he asked. Miriam glanced back toward the heart of the colony. "Someone has to close the door." His face hardened, but he did not argue. On Europa, everyone understood what duty looked like. He left. Miriam sealed the lock behind him and returned alone to Central Control. On her screen, Dominion ships descended toward orbit, elegant and monstrous in the black. She armed the sequence. The first strike from the invaders hit the main reactor field. Europa answered. The human charges detonated in a chain that split the colony from beneath. Ice tunnels collapsed. Pressure systems ruptured. Fuel reserves turned into white fire. Towers of frozen debris blasted upward into the dark. Then the orbital fuel spine disengaged from its dock. Its thrusters fired once. Only once. That was enough. The structure, hundreds of meters long and full of volatile mass, dropped across the path of a descending Dominion cruiser. The ship tried to bank, but space was tight and the collision came too fast. The spine punched through the cruiser's forward shield envelope and tore across its hull. Metal opened like wet paper. Atmosphere vented in a glittering wave. The cruiser began to spin. On the Sovereign Wrath, the bridge fell silent. Malrex stared at the damage report. "One colonial facility," he said flatly, "just crippled a cruiser." No one answered. What should have been a lesson in fear had become the first Dominion loss of the campaign. Malrex's jaw tightened. "Advance the fleet," he ordered. "No more demonstrations. Break their war line." The Dominion fleet moved inward. Near Mars, humanity was waiting. The battlefield had been chosen months, even years, in advance. Human planners knew they could not defend the entire system evenly. So they prepared layers. Kill corridors. Drone nests. Mine grids hidden among commercial debris. Decoy signatures. Missile envelopes anchored to old freight lanes. Battlespace shaped not for honor, but for damage. Fleet Admiral Hannah Mercer stood on the bridge of the battleship Resolute and watched the enemy close. The officers around her were afraid. She could smell it in the air. No shame in that. She was afraid too. But fear was only useful if it sharpened the hand. "All vessels," she said into the fleet channel, "this is Mercer. You know the plan. First strike, then scatter. Do not duel. Do not posture. Bleed them and move. Every minute we stay alive is another minute Earth stays free." Acknowledgements flashed across the screen. Chinese missile destroyers. Indian rail platforms. European defense carriers. American drone tenders. Brazilian escort groups. Lunar gunships. Martian patrol craft. Different uniforms. Different accents. Different flags still painted under emergency coalition marks. One species. One line. The Dominion came in dense and proud. The humans struck first. Hundreds of attack drones burst from cold storage compartments hidden among drifting cargo and dead satellites. They swarmed forward in complete silence, running dark until the final seconds. Then their engines flared and they accelerated hard. Point defense grids from the Dominion ships lit space with burning lines. Drones exploded. Dozens. Scores. Then the survivors hit. Not with lasers. Not with plasma. With mass. Each drone carried an overloaded reactor core wrapped in steel and guidance logic. They rammed shields, vents, sensors, and gun housings. 3 Dominion escorts died in under a minute. 2 more lost maneuver control. A carrier's launch bay blew open in a storm of fire and wreckage. On the Sovereign Wrath, Malrex's disbelief turned to anger. What kind of fleet opens with suicide drones? The answer came from Commander Tariff, his face pale in the tactical glow. One that planned to lose ships from the start. Human rail platforms opened up next. Long-range slugs crossed space at impossible speed, not trying to chew through armor evenly, but slamming repeatedly into one damaged target at a time. Human missile boats launched spreads on ballistic drift, forcing Dominion ships to maneuver directly into hidden mine fields. The mines woke when the enemy entered the zone. Space blossomed with savage light. A Dominion destroyer vanished in fragments. A frigate broke apart amid venting atmosphere. 2 corvettes smashed into each other while evading debris and died together. Still the invaders pushed forward. They had numbers. They had heavier armor. They had deeper reserve lines. Every exchange hurt them, but every exchange hurt humanity more. One by one the human ships started to fall. A Martian defense craft lost its stern and kept firing until its reactor failed. A lunar escort split in half and used its final seconds to dump its missile magazine at point-blank range. A carrier full of reserve drones turned broadside to shield civilian escape traffic, taking beam strikes until the hull glowed red. The Dominion fleet paid for every kilometer, but they kept advancing. On the bridge of the Resolute, Hannah watched her display with terrible calm. Losses climbed. Ammo dropped. Kill zones collapsed behind retreating ships. The first line was dying exactly as planned. Because the plan had never been to hold forever. It had been to make the enemy remember coming. Signal Omega units, Hannah said. Her executive officer looked at her once, then nodded and relayed it. Far off the port side, an old human cruiser named Gravesend changed heading. Its hull was already burning from multiple penetrations. It should have been retreating. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the Dominion center. Malrek saw it too late. "Their cruiser is charging," shouted a sensor officer. "Weapons disabled, but drive output climbing." "Destroy it," Malrek snapped. The Dominion ships hit Gravesend with enough firepower to kill it 3 times over. Armor sloughed away. Compartments blew open. Half the vessel became debris. But the engines held. They had been reinforced for one reason. Gravesend hit the Dominion battle line at a fraction of light speed, straight into the shield gap of a command carrier already weakened by drone strikes. The blast rolled outward like a newborn star. When the sensors cleared, the carrier was gone. So were 2 escorts and most of Gravesend. On every channel, human crews heard the same last transmission from its captain, cut by static at the end. "Tell Earth we made them pay." The battle swung on. By hour 4, humanity's fleet was breaking apart. By hour 5, it was no longer a fleet in the normal sense, only burning groups of ships falling back in planned disorder. By hour 6, the Dominion had control of the field. At a brutal cost. Nearly a quarter of their front assault ships were destroyed, crippled, or combat ineffective. The road to Earth was open, but it was open through wreckage. On the Resolute, alarms screamed from every deck. The battleship had lost half its guns and most of its shields. Fires burned through the midsection. Escape routes flashed on internal maps. Hannah remained in command chair as if the bridge were still whole. "Civilian pods clear?" she asked. "Last wave launching now." "Good." Her operations chief looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Admiral, command transfer protocols are ready. You need to leave." Hannah did not answer immediately. On the screen before her, Earth turned slowly in blue silence. At last she opened a fleet-wide channel. "This is Admiral Mercer. All surviving units, withdraw to secondary defense patterns. Ground networks assume full resistance doctrine." Her hand moved to the reactor authorization key. "We did what we came here to do." The bridge crew understood then. Several tried to protest. One openly wept. Another saluted. Hannah returned the salute. "Go," she said. They obeyed because she had always obeyed duty before comfort, and she had taught them to do the same. Minutes later she was alone on the bridge. She opened one final channel, this time to the Dominion fleet. "This is Fleet Admiral Hannah Mercer," she said. "You wanted Earth defenseless. Come and see what that costs." She set the Resolute on collision course with the nearest Dominion cruiser and armed the core. When the ship died, it took the cruiser with it. And in the silence that followed the blast, the path to Earth finally stood open. Fleet Lord Malrek watched the remains of the battle drift around his formation and felt a sensation he had not expected to feel against a young species. Not triumph. Unease. He had won. The human fleet was shattered. The inner defenses were broken. Earth lay ahead. But victory did not feel clean. It felt expensive. Too expensive. He remembered Caratha's face in the iron assembly. The certainty in the old warlord's voice. The warning no one had wanted to hear. Then new reports arrived from the surface. Civilian populations vanishing underground. Military command signals rerouted through buried networks. Orbital maps suddenly losing clarity as human satellites self-destructed in coordinated denial patterns. They were preparing for occupation. Malrek realized the truth a second later. They had been preparing for occupation for years. The Battle of Mars had not been the defense of Earth. It had only been the door. And humanity, bleeding and furious, had just invited the Dominion to step through it. The Dominion had broken Earth's fleet, but as its ships moved toward the wounded planet, the invaders were finally beginning to understand the real horror of war with humans. The battle in space had only been the part they were willing to lose. The bombardment of Earth began 3 days after the Battle of Mars. Fleet Lord Malrek had used those 3 days to regroup his damaged formation, drag crippled ships into repair lines, and prepare the final stage of conquest. On paper, the campaign was still a success. The human fleet was gone. Orbital superiority belonged to the Dominion. Earth's skies were open. So Malrek sent the formal terms again. Submit. Disarm. Accept occupation. Earth's answer came from every emergency frequency on the planet. A calm human voice, speaking for all remaining governments. No. That was all. Just one word. No speeches. No pleading. No bargaining. Just refusal. Then the bombardment began. Dominion beam batteries struck military sites first. Missile fields. Air bases. Orbital cannon shafts. Surface command bunkers identified before satellite loss. Fire rained down through the clouds and cities shook beneath the force of it. Mountains split. Ports burned. Shockwaves rolled across continents. From orbit, Earth looked wounded. But not broken. After the first day, human resistance should have started collapsing. After the second, surrender should have followed. After the third, Fleet Lord Malrek understood something was very wrong. The humans were vanishing. Not dying. Vanishing. Surface scans showed heat scars, craters, fire zones, and ruins, but fewer bodies than predicted. Fewer command losses. Fewer total signal failures. Communications still flickered through buried relays. Weapons still fired from impossible places. Missiles still rose from mountain ranges the Dominion had already struck twice. By the end of the week, Commander Tarav brought the truth to Malrek in a voice heavy with disbelief. They went underground. Malrek stared at him. All of them? No, my lord. Not all. But enough. Civilian shelter systems. Military bunkers. Deep transit tunnels. Industrial caverns. Planetary war shelters built long before our arrival. Some are decades old. Some older. Malrek's eyes narrowed. They expected invasion. Tarav gave the slightest nod. They prepared for it. The Fleet Lord said nothing for several long seconds. Then he looked down at the blue world below and felt, for the first time in his career, the unpleasant edge of being outplanned. Then we remove them from the ground, he said. Prepare landing forces. The first Dominion ground assault landed in the ruins of New York. 2,000 soldiers descended in armored dropships through smoke and ash. They expected resistance at the landing zones, maybe pockets of scattered human fighters. Instead, they found silence. The city was empty. Towering buildings stood blackened but upright. Streets were full of abandoned vehicles. Emergency lights still flashed in some windows. Broadcast screens flickered with static. Wind blew ash through intersections where millions should have been. The soldiers advanced block by block. No fire. No movement. No civilians. Then night came. The first shot took a squad leader through the eye lens from 700 meters away. The second attack was a buried charge beneath a transit road, lifting an armored carrier into the air like a toy. The third came from the subway tunnels, where human fighters released choking chemical smoke through ventilation shafts and vanished before the Dominion troops even understood what they were breathing. By dawn, 63 invaders were dead. They had not captured a single human alive. The pattern repeated everywhere. In London, a command post fortified inside a government complex lasted 4 days before the basement walls blew inward and the entire lower level filled with burning fuel. In Cairo, a patrol crossing an open square was cut down by fire from museum windows, minarets, drainage channels, and 2 buildings the Dominion had already cleared. In Shanghai, engineers trying to restore power to a seized district triggered a trap hidden in the city's own grid. The resulting surge killed every soldier in the substation. The humans were never where the Dominion expected. And they were always where the Dominion was weakest. Malrec increased troop deployments. 5,000 became 12,000. 12,000 became 20. Then 30. The result did not change. Because humans were not trying to hold territory. They were trying to make territory toxic. Every sewer could hide a bomb. Every corpse could hide a trigger. Every crying child could be bait. Every hospital could be empty except for 1 sniper and 1 shaped charge waiting behind an operating wall. Dominion soldiers started sleeping in armor. Then many stopped sleeping at all. The music started in the second week. That was what broke some of them. It played from hidden speakers in tunnels, abandoned shops, collapsed train stations, sewer vents, rooftops, elevator shafts. Human songs. Some loud and angry. Some quiet. Some almost beautiful. The words changed, but the message stayed the same. We are here. You are not safe. We will never stop. One traumatized Dominion medic, after treating his 4th dismembered squad in 3 days, recorded a private message to his family. These beings do not fight for victory in the way we understand it, he said. They fight to punish. To endure. To remain. We take ground in daylight and lose certainty by night. I do not know how to heal soldiers who are afraid of every doorway. Malrec never saw that message. But the fear in it spread through his army anyway. 3 months into the occupation, the Fleet Lord sat in a hardened command chamber above Earth and reviewed numbers he hated. Troops lost, rising. Cities secured, almost none. Supply efficiency, falling. Resistance attacks, increasing. And worst of all, the humans were learning. Each week their attacks became cleaner, faster, more coordinated. They were adapting to Dominion armor, Dominion movement doctrine, Dominion shift timing, even Dominion medical evacuations. Tarev entered with a sealed report. We captured a human, he said. Malrec looked up sharply. Alive. For 1 hour. The footage began. A human female sat against a wall in the ruins of a hospital. She looked young, though Malrec had learned that human age was hard to judge under trauma. One side of her face was burned. Her left arm was bandaged with torn fabric. She had clearly been in pain long before capture. A Dominion interrogator asked the standard questions. Unit. Command structure. Shelter network. Weapons cache locations. The girl laughed once, dry and weak. Then the interrogator asked the wrong question. Why continue resisting? He said. Your world is already lost. The girl lifted her head. Her eyes were bright. Not wild. Not broken. Right. You should have listened to your old general, she said. Malrec felt his spine go cold. The girl kept speaking. We have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We know every ugly trick. Every dirty method. Every cruel little way to make an enemy bleed and panic and turn on itself. She coughed, blood touching her teeth, but smiled anyway. You think this is war? This is restraint. The recording ended there. She had died before the next hour. Malrec ordered the footage sealed. It did not matter. By then the words had already spread through half the fleet. You should have listened to your old general. That same week, Dominion supply ships began disappearing. At first it was a single convoy from the asteroid transfer lanes. Then 2 fuel carriers between Jupiter and Mars. Then an escorted ammunition line simply went dark beyond Callisto. Malrec assumed raiders. What Dominion scouts found was worse. The ships were drifting intact. No battle damage. No hull breach. No boarding scars. But every crew aboard was dead. Tarav stood over one medical report and looked sick. Biological agent, he said. Tailored. Fast-acting. Airborne in sealed compartments. It killed the crews before they could send distress. Malrek's claws tightened around the edge of the table. How are humans deploying biological weapons in deep space? Their fleet is gone. Tarav did not answer immediately. Then he pulled up a long-range tactical map. New red markers bloomed across the outer system. Because their fleet was not gone, he said quietly. We destroyed the ships they showed us. Malrek stared. The map zoomed further out. Jupiter. Saturn. The belt. Outer mining rocks once marked inactive. Thermal shadows inside captured asteroids. Masked construction signatures that now, in hindsight, were obvious. They were building, Malrek said. Yes. In secret. Yes. For how long? Tarav met his gaze. Probably since before we arrived. The first counterattack came near Jupiter. A Dominion convoy with 6 escort vessels entered a transfer corridor believed secure. They never reached the midpoint. Human warships rose from the radiation shadow of the gas giant like knives out of dark water. They were smaller than Dominion cruisers, rougher in shape, less elegant in line, but they moved with terrifying confidence. And they were different from the fleet that had died at Mars. These ships had learned. Their shields flickered with stolen Dominion design principles. Their engines ran hotter. Their targeting spread was tighter. Their missile timing was perfect. They opened with kinetics. Metal rods accelerated to enormous speed slammed through the lead escort before its shield system even understood what it was facing. Missiles came next, not straight, but drifting like debris until they corrected course at close range. Human gunners focused one target at a time, killing ships in sequence instead of wasting fire across the line. The convoy escorts died one after another. One human frigate lost its port side under return fire. It kept moving. It used its last engine burn to cross directly under a Dominion destroyer and overloaded its core. The blast killed them both. The survivors among the Dominion convoy reported one final detail that reached Malrek's command decks several hours later. The human crews had been broadcasting music during the attack. Not battle signals. Music. Malrek listened to one recovered fragment from inside a ruined escort bridge. The translation software struggled, but the meaning was clear enough. Stand together. Hold the line. Do not yield. If we fall, make it hurt. He shut the file off halfway through. War Marshal Kareth arrived the next day. He came not in triumph, not in ceremony, but in silence. The old warlord entered the orbital command chamber wearing travel armor and the expression of someone who had hoped never to be proven right. Malrek dismissed everyone except Tarav. For a moment the two old commanders simply looked at each other. Kareth broke the silence first. How bad? Malrek almost laughed at the question. It was too simple for the scale of disaster, yet somehow exact. Bad enough that the word victory now sounds foolish, he said. Kareth moved to the tactical map and studied it without surprise. You still control orbit, he said. For now. You still have numbers. For now. Kareth looked at him. And every day you stay, the humans grow stronger. Malrek felt anger rise, not because the statement was false, but because it was true. They are one world, he said. One species. One system. No, Kareth replied. They are now a war machine built around memory. He zoomed the map down toward Earth. You bombed their cities, occupied their ground, killed their families, destroyed their homes. Do you know what humans do with pain, Malrek? Malrek said nothing. They organize it. The words landed harder than any accusation. Kareth continued. They are not just resisting now. They are learning your methods, studying your routes, testing your weaknesses. Soon this war will stop being local. Malrek turned sharply toward him. What do you suggest? Kareth answered at once. Withdraw. Tell the Dominion the system cannot be held at acceptable cost. Quarantine if you must. Negotiate if you are wise. But leave. Malrek looked back at Earth. Blue. Scarred. Still defiant. I cannot retreat, he said. Caratha's voice remained calm. Then you will bleed here until the war spreads. The warning sat between them. This time Malrek believed it. But belief was not freedom. The regent was watching. The council expected results. The fleet lord had lost too much already to return in disgrace. He did the next worst thing instead of the wisest. He requested reinforcements. For a few months, the Dominion posture shifted. Stronger defensive screens. Tighter convoy patterns. Fewer deep pushes into cities. More orbital control, less surface ambition. It slowed the losses. It did not stop them. Because by then, the war was no longer only on Earth. A year after the invasion began, deep space listening posts across the region started going dark. Then came the impossible sensor reports. Faster-than-light signatures blooming not outside the solar system, but inside it. Dominion officers panicked at the readings. FTL transitions that deep in a gravity well should have been unstable. Dangerous. Almost impossible. The humans had made them work anyway. They emerged in coordinated strike groups from hidden lanes throughout the system. 90 human warships. Then more. Then still more behind false echoes and signal ghosts. And now they carried weapons fully shaped by stolen Dominion science and human brutality. The first Dominion battlecruiser died to a relativistic kinetic strike from a ship hidden in Jupiter's upper atmosphere. The projectile punched through bow to stern and left the vessel breaking apart before the crew understood it had been hit. Another cruiser vanished under a wave of fighters that ignored escort fire and rammed engines, hangars, sensors, command decks, every pilot willing to die if the impact opened a hole for the next. The human fleet fought like wolves. Not charging in one proud line. Circling. Cutting. Concentrating. Never wasting the wound. For 8 hours the system burned. When the human fleet finally withdrew, they left behind a message. The broadcast appeared on every Dominion screen. A human woman stood on a command deck scarred by battle. Older than most frontline fighters. Gray in her hair. Burn marks visible on one side of her neck. Her eyes were steady and merciless. My name is Commander Miriam Vale, she said. Malrek felt his breath catch. He knew that name. Europa. She had survived. A year ago, she continued, you came to our system believing we would kneel. You destroyed our homes. You killed our people. You taught us your empire had 1,000 worlds and thought that made you untouchable. A star map appeared behind her. Dominion systems lit across it. Then red markers bloomed. All across the map. We have spent the last year learning where you live, she said. Where you build. Where you feed your fleets. Where your children sleep. While you occupied our world, we studied yours. Malrek's stomach turned cold. Strike groups are already in your territory, Miriam said. This is not revenge. This is instruction. You brought total war to Earth. We are now returning the lesson. The feed ended. For 2 heartbeats the command chamber stood frozen. Then reports began to arrive. A Dominion shipyard in the outer provinces crippled by sabotage. A fuel depot chain destroyed. An agricultural moon poisoned. 2 military colonies struck by nuclear-level attacks. A relay nexus shattered by relativistic debris. Then more. And more. The war had escaped the solar system. Exactly as Carath had predicted. Malrek stood in the center of the storm, watching red warnings spread across the strategic map like blood in water. No frontier was secure. No supply lane was trustworthy. No homeworld felt far enough away. The Dominion Regent's order came less than 6 hours later. Withdraw from Sol immediately. All occupation efforts suspended. Return surviving forces for debrief and containment planning. Suspended. Malrek almost laughed at the word. As if the campaign could ever be resumed. As if Earth were still an objective instead of a scar. The evacuation from Earth became one final nightmare. Humans did not try to stop the retreat entirely. They only made it costly. Landing zones were shelled. Transports were ambushed. Fuel depots ignited at the wrong moment. Buried charges sent towers of concrete and steel into ascent paths. Every withdrawal corridor became a gauntlet. By the time the last Dominion soldiers lifted off, Thousands had been left behind, dead, missing, or buried under the ruins of a world that refused to accept chains. From orbit, Malrek watched the planet shrink beneath him. Earth was still free. Not because it had been stronger. Because it had been willing to become stronger faster than the Dominion could break it. The battered fleet limped toward the edge of the system in broken formation. Behind them drifted wreckage from more than a year of failed conquest. Then one final message came from Earth. Audio only. A human voice, calm and clear. You came to our home and taught us your name. Now we know your worlds, your routes, your fears, and your limits. Leave us alone, and we will end this here. Return, and we will carry this war to every corner of your empire. This is not a threat. It is a promise. The channel closed. No one on Malrek's bridge spoke. When the fleet finally entered faster-than-light transit, War Marshal Kareth stood beside him in silence for a long time. At last Malrek said, "You were right." Kareth did not answer immediately. Then he said, "That was never the point." Back in Dominion space, the damage only grew. Human strike groups kept moving. Rebellions inspired by Earth began to rise. Smaller subject worlds started asking dangerous questions. If one young species could make the Dominion retreat, then perhaps the Dominion was not eternal after all. Years later, in a chamber much quieter than the one where it had all begun, the rulers of the Dominion met human envoys under terms they would once have considered impossible. Recognition, sovereignty, orders, reparations. They accepted because the alternative was worse. Humanity had survived invasion, learned interstellar war, mapped the empire, and proved something no one in the old order had believed possible. A single world, if stubborn enough, could change the balance of the galaxy. As the human delegation departed, Kareth stood alone once more beneath a living star map. Sol still glowed at the edge, but it no longer looked small. It looked central, important, dangerous. Not because humanity had been born powerful, because power had come for them, and they had refused to die quietly. Kareth looked up at the stars and understood at last what the Dominion had never understood in time. Humans did not fight because they expected easy victory. Humans fought because once they decided a thing must not be lost, they would pour everything into making that decision true. Ships, cities, years, lives, whole futures. And if an empire was foolish enough to stand on the other side of that decision, then the empire would learn the lesson in full. The Dominion had gone to Earth to claim a world. Instead, it created an enemy that would be remembered across the stars, a species that turned survival into fury, fury into strength, and strength into a warning the galaxy would never forget.